And now we get to learn about our neighbors from the north and what the Wyoming side is doing for their herpetological aspects. I'd like to welcome up Wendy, the state herpetologist. This is what I'm going to refer to. That's the equivalent. And yeah, do you want to share what you guys have been doing? Take it away.
All right, can everybody hear me okay? Okay, perfect. Let's see, just a little pointers and stuff. All right, well first, so my name is Wendy Estes Zumpf. I am the herpetological coordinator for the Wyoming Game and Fish Department. And I'm also a Warner College alum. I wanted to thank Hunter for inviting me to come down and talk about Wyoming herps at your Colorado meeting. I also just wanted to thank COPARC and all of you in general for always inviting the small Wyoming herp contingent of herp lovers to come down here and crash your meetings every year. We always have such a fun time just nerding out with other herp people because we don't have a lot of them in Wyoming. So this is a really fun meeting. All right, so Wyoming is not really known for having much species diversity in herpetofauna, but I like to say that the ones we have are pretty special, including this little guy. This is our beloved endemic Wyoming toad. So we basically have 12 species of amphibians and 28 species of reptiles. You'll see that the vast majority of both those groups are considered species of greatest conservation need in the state. That designation is not necessarily because we know that there are issues with those species. In most cases, it's because of just a pure lack of information on those species in the state. And so we're erring on the side of caution by giving them sort of this conservation status until we can learn more about them. And so there's some species for which we know very, very little about. For example, the plains box turtle. We have one confirmed record in the entire state, and it's not in any digital database. The only way we know about it is because it was an observation that George Baxter had that he included in the 1980 Amphibians and Reptiles of Wyoming by Baxter and Stone. And I was trying to get that record from Stone, and he said he knew George had it. It was in a paper file, and all of that went away when they emptied his office at the university. So we lost it. But we do know that there was one confirmed record. We have never had a confirmed record of a wild box turtle ever again in the state. So we find them in like Lander and stuff like that in the towns, release pets, but we really don't have any other wild records. Western yellow-bellied racers, so we have lots of eastern yellow-bellied racers, but we have 2 records of racers in the Jackson region. They're most likely western yellow-bellied racers, but we haven't got our hands on one to actually confirm that, so I can't officially add it to the species list for the state. Plains black-headed snakes are we have some of the fewest records of any snakes for that species, and it's hard to tell what are confirmed and what are not because I definitely get a lot of people telling me they have black-headed snakes, and it's just like a wandering garter snake that has a really black head. So it's really hard to try to differentiate when I don't get photos from it, but from the best I can tell, we have 3 or less confirmed records of plains black-headed snakes. And so, Matt, are you here? Like these are
I found 5.
What?
Yeah.
Are you?
Yeah, you gotta look it up. I don't know. I need to talk to Katrina, and I don't know how you guys want me to upload that stuff.
Yeah, I need to talk to you. So, like, Matt is one of the only herpers we have in Wyoming. It's awesome. So, yes, like these are the species that are. We also have only 3 records that I know of for Great Basin skink. These are only recently discovered in the state on the far, far western side. Same thing for desert striped whip snake. These were only recently discovered in the state of Wyoming. And so part of the reason why we don't have a lot of information on herps in Wyoming is because it's a really large land mass. It's very diverse. It's a very inhospitable landscape a lot of the time. And we only have, I think we're just above 575,000 people in the state. And most of those people are not interested in looking for herps. So we don't have a lot of help. I'm the only permanent herpetologist at the Wyoming Game and Fish Department, and I get 2 techs to help me every summer. And so sort of invitation like, I need eyes out there. It's not that inhospitable. At any rate, because we are so short-handed in terms of getting help with herps, everything that we do in Wyoming with herps is pretty much relies on collaboration from a lot of different agencies. And so when I say we throughout this talk, it's mostly it's including all sorts of groups. So we work with a lot of different agencies, graduate students, universities, volunteers, and so like we is not Game and Fish. We is the herp community in Wyoming and everybody who does care about these critters. And so just kind of wanted to give a little introduction to the types of projects that we work on in Wyoming, and they kind of fall into 3 categories. So the first is species recovery. Most of that work is with Wyoming toads and boreal toads. We also do population status and monitoring. This is trying to figure out some of those species of greatest conservation need and try to figure out do we need to be concerned about them? Are there enough of them? What are their habitats? What are their threats? And then we also just do some basic distribution surveys. Like I said, we are still discovering species in the state. And so I just wanted to kind of, for the rest of the talk, walk through some of these different types of studies that we've been working on. And so the largest species recovery effort we have is for our beloved little endemic Wyoming toad. So this species is a glacial relict. It occurs only in the Laramie Basin in southeastern Wyoming. The species began declining in the 1970s. It was listed as federally endangered in 1984 and was presumed extinct in 1985. Thankfully, the species was rediscovered it was a little private fishing lake called Mortensen Lake in 1987. It's now Mortensen Lake National Wildlife Refuge. Unfortunately, Wyoming toads are highly susceptible to amphibian chytrid fungus, and chytrid fungus hit the Mortensen Lake population in 1989. And so, out of desperation, they grabbed about 24 Wyoming toads from that site and brought them into captivity, which was good because shortly after that, that site disappeared. And so now, we believe that all of the Wyoming toads in existence basically came from less than 10 of those 24 toads that actually survived and reproduced. So talk about genetic bottleneck going on. But from that very scary beginning, we are definitely making a comeback. So captive breeding is absolutely essential to the existence of this species. We have currently between 8 and 10 zoos, hatcheries, and research facilities across the United States. For a little while, Canada was breeding Wyoming toads as well. And right now we have 4 active reintroduction sites in the Laramie Basin. None of these sites are self-sustaining yet. We are finally, with some new release strategies we're using, we're seeing more instances of wild breeding, but none of these sites can sustain themselves. They rely on annual augmentation by captive bred individuals, and the zoos do an amazing job at pumping out little toadlets, where I think we're up around 20 to 30,000 tadpoles are released each year. And then starting in 2016, we started a new program that we call the Grow Out program, where they hold back a subset, usually about 1,000 of the tadpoles, and grow them up to 1-year-old toads, and then release them as 1-year-old toads. And it turns out that when you raise a toad in captivity, a 1-year-old toad in the wild is going to be this big. It's this big when as a captive toad, and the males can actually breed as 1-year-old, which usually they have to be 3 or 4 years old before they can breed. So this is part of the reason why we're starting to see some wild breeding. We've been doing a lot of really cool research. Again, we means like a whole group of people who, the Wyoming Toad Recovery Team and all its affiliates, on trying to bring this species back. We've had some really great graduate research on optimizing release strategies, studying the fate of these released toads. Turns out that they really don't know that garter snakes are not their friends. And just trying to figure out what their habitat preferences are, and we're just starting on a new suite of projects to try to look at improving chytrid fungus tolerance or resistance. So we're really excited to see where we go from here. The next suite of projects, determining population status. One of the projects I wanted to highlight is Bighorn Mountain Amphibian Monitoring project that we have going on. The Bighorn Mountains are an isolated mountain range in north central Wyoming, and it has just a really unique species assemblage. So we have what I call the big three frogs, so that co-occur only in the Bighorn Mountains. So we have the Columbia spotted frog, the wood frog, and the northern leopard frog. And the Columbia spotted frog basically occurs, is the only species that occurs in the northern bighorns. And the northern leopard frogs is the only species that occurs in the southern bighorns. And then in the central bighorns, you get wood frogs, and you get overlap of both the Columbias and the northern leopard frogs. And what's even more weird is that the like ubiquitous boreal chorus frogs and tiger salamanders that are found in any water quality, any elevation across all of Wyoming, they're completely absent from the Bighorn Mountains. So it is just the weirdest species assemblage. Two of the species, the Columbia spotted frog and the wood frog, are actually glacial relic populations in the bighorns as well. And the northern leopard frogs are the last high elevation northern leopard frog populations that we know of in Wyoming. They're doing well in the lower elevations, but sort of a common theme throughout the Rocky Mountain region that we've lost decades ago, lost the high elevation leopard frogs. But we have, in the Cloud Peak Wilderness, we have healthy populations of leopard frogs. The scary thing is that chytrid fungus was detected in the Bighorn Mountains first in 2010. It is now pretty prevalent in the Columbia spotted frogs in the northern bighorns. And so because of concern with these glacial relic populations and this unique species assemblage, we began monitoring breeding sites in the bighorns in 2015. We are seeing potential declines in Columbia spotted frogs in those northern bighorns. They're doing fine in the central bighorns, but not in the north. It's not a definite decline. It's sort of a slow trend. It's a little concerning that it coincides with the area where chytrid fungus is documented, but we can't make that link yet. But we're looking into it more. But I will say I got some really good news from the biologists that I work with in that region, where they saw an increase in the number of Columbia spotted frogs at one of the sites that has been declining for a number of years now. So this year was a good year, and so I'm really interested in looking at the data and see where that falls in the trend. So we're still trying to figure out what's going on there, but hopefully we can keep this like really cool assemblage of amphibians going. Another population status study that we've been working on is with spiny soft shells in the Bighorn River. And so the Bighorn River drainage is in north central Wyoming, and this population is on the very periphery of the species range. And I actually just recently found out that the most upstream end of this population is probably the highest elevation records for spiny soft shells. The population is isolated from the rest of the species range by a big dam right on the Montana-Wyoming border. And there's a huge, basically the Bighorn Lake is a flooded gorge. And so it really, between the dam and then that huge flooded rocky gorge, they are isolated. And there's been, over many years, anecdotal evidence of decline. So we wanted to try to figure out how is the population doing, is there any truth behind this anecdotal evidence. And so in 2021, we began a drainage-wide trapping effort for spiny soft shells across the entire Bighorn River. And we were able to find sort of three, they weren't common, but we were able to find sort of three pockets of soft shells. And so in 2022, we went to those two pockets, one in the north and one in the south, and did some radiotelemetry. And so the results of that study basically showed that they are not common in the drainage. That we had extremely low capture rates, 1.3 turtles per 100 trap nights. So a lot of empty traps. So either they're very, very uncommon or we're really, really bad at trapping turtles. One of the cool findings that we had is that in the most upstream portion of the drainage, we have a really, probably the densest population of spiny soft shells in a very small area. And what's really weird about it is that this is clear, cold, blue ribbon trout river water. So not what you think of when you think of spiny soft shell habitat. What they're using are the hot springs at Hot Springs State Park in Thermopolis. And they're not just like hanging out in those. When we radio tag them, they basically, when they do leave a hot spring, they just go to the next one down, hang out at that little hot spring for a little bit, and then come back to their other hot spring. And so they're just hot spring hopping. There is no good nesting habitat that we can see. And yet it is the only place that from like every couple of years we do get people reporting hatchlings, sending pictures of hatchlings. So they are nesting. I don't know where. The habitat is terrible in every way, except apparently they really like hot springs. So we're continuing to try to figure out what's going on with spiny soft shells, but that was a very unusual finding. And sort of the next thing, not field project related, that I've been teaming up with collaborators on is just trying to get more of the word out about herps in Wyoming. I've worked with other organizations and volunteers, like Matt has a great snake educational
Presentation.
What's that?
Presentation.
Yeah, that he's developed, and Wyoming State Parks is getting into education, the Biodiversity Institute, and then I team up a lot with the Wyoming Natural Diversity Database because they have a lot of really great resources to get the word out about herps in a couple different ways. And so one of the things that I've been trying to work on is, we don't have basically paper resources anymore for herps of Wyoming. We had the 1980 Baxter and Stone. There's a second edition of that, but that's out of print. And then Dan Lewis, in 2011, he did an Amphibians and Reptiles of Wyoming. That's now out of print. The last time I looked to try to get a copy, it was like $900. And so that's sort of not very accessible to the general public. And so what I was able to do was get a small grant from Game and Fish to win the Wyoming Natural Diversity Database to start developing field guide online field guide accounts in their what's called the Wyoming Field Guide. And so the first grant I was able to get was to do all of the native amphibians in Wyoming. So those ones are now up and available in the Wyoming Field Guide. It's really easy to search. What's really cool about the layout of this field guide is that within the field guide, it links to their actual database, and so you can see the occurrence records within the field guide. You can also click on and see the range map, the predicted distribution, and so this is all pulling live from their database, and so as records are added, it's going to naturally be added in the field guide. So it's interactive, it's a really great tool, and I just got word just a few weeks ago that I was able to get a small grant for half the reptiles. So I'm working on it. So I'm trying to get the word out more about herps in Wyoming and make it accessible to the public. And then another tool that the Natural Diversity Database has is what they call their Data Explorer. This is an interactive tool where you can click on and see generalized, so the public sees what we call generalized observations. These are basically observations fuzzed to the township range scale, but you can at least get a statewide perspective on what species occur where, and they're color-coded by date, so you can see if there's only historic observations in an area. So this is a really great tool to help people see, oh, yeah, this hasn't been documented here. I'm going to go search for it. If I can get enough people interested in doing this. So this is a really cool tool, and I'm really excited because Game and Fish is redoing their webpage right now, or their website right now, and for the first time, herps are going to have a webpage on the Game and Fish website. So I worked really hard to get it in, and I had to hit people from different angles, but I got it in. So yeah, we're going to have a webpage for herps. And lastly, I just had to say, if you want to do anything with herps in Wyoming, these are the regulations to just be aware of. Chapter 52 is take of non-game wildlife from within Wyoming, and all of our herps are classified as non-game. Chapter 33 is our scientific research, education, special use permit. And so if you do want to come up and do some herping in Wyoming, and you expect to be handling anything, all you have to do is submit a Chapter 33 permit. So even if it's not one of the species listed over on the side, if you're going to be handling critters in general in Wyoming, you need a Chapter 33 permit, but the permit application is free. So just get yourself a Chapter 33 permit, and any of the data that you collect goes to Game and Fish, which helps me as well. And then Chapter 69 is just sort of what you can bring into or possess in Wyoming. So that's pretty much all I had. I was hoping to leave time for questions.
You got one question?
What's that? Not at the moment, but why are you offering help?
Well, excellent. Thank you, Wendy. That was awesome.